Welcome to Next Round with me, Dale McDermott.
And me, David W. Higgins.
A young Irish look at the economy, politics and society.
Covering home and abroad.
For the thinkers, the dreamers and the doers, this is Next Round. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Next Round. This week, we are delighted to welcome Eoghan Murphy. Eoghan is the author of Running from Office, Confessions of Ambition and Failure in Politics, which details his political career. Best-selling author and fellow podcaster Rory Stewart has described the book as wonderfully engaging, honest, and a witty portrait of the humiliations, idealism, nobility, and banality of democratic life. A bit about Eoghan before we start. He is a former Dublin City Councillor, a former TD or Member of the Irish Parliament for international listeners and viewers, a former Irish Government Minister, serving as Minister of State at the Department of Finance, and then as Minister for Housing, Planning and Local Government. Since leaving politics, he has worked for the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe's Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, where he has led election observation teams to Georgia, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Italy, Uzbekistan, and Armenia. Before entering politics, Eoghan worked in the UN system on disarmament issues and is a graduate of King's College London with an MA in International Relations and of University College Dublin with a BA in English and Philosophy. He was born in Dublin and now lives in London. Eoghan, you are very welcome to Next Round.
Thanks very much.
Eoghan, I read the book over the weekend, and I have to say, first of all, it's a really fantastic read, and congratulations on doing it. And my first question, Eoghan, really goes, first of all, to your personal reflections on politics and change. And early on in the book, you mention and question whether politics corrupted your personality. How do you feel that change manifested over time?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it was something I was trying to capture in the book about this journey that you go through as a person. So, I was exploring the idea of getting involved in politics. I didn't come from a political family or a background. And I was talking to people about what's politics like? What's it really like running for a city council, dealing with local issues, meeting people every day? And I got lots of great insights and feedback. But what no one really ever told me, or at least maybe they tried to tell me, but I wasn't listening, is that politics is a vocation. So it's not just a job, it's who you become as a person, and it's how everyone sees you. And I wasn't expecting it to kind of overtake my personality and basically come to define the world and how I moved through it. And I didn't necessarily have a problem with that in the beginning, but as you do kind of, I suppose, move up in your career in politics, you start to compromise yourself in ways, decisions you're making. I don't mean in an unethical way. It's not about that. It's more about your personality. It's about how you are interacting with the world and those around you. Because at the end of the day, you need people to vote for you. And you need them to have a positive impression of you. And you want them to talk to their friends and their family about you so that they'll vote for you. You also need them to help you, to volunteer on your campaigns, to put up posters, to put out flyers. And I started to get a feeling early on in politics when I was a candidate that, my relationships were becoming quite transactional. I'd have my good friends and they were helping out on the campaign. And so if I was having a fight with a good friend, would that then impact the amount of time he might give me on the campaign? Or, if I was in a coffee shop and someone interrupted the coffee I was having with a friend, I'd have to be nice to that person, even though I felt that my personal life was being intruded, or my private life, because I needed them to have a positive impression of me, like I was saying. So those kind of a transactional way that a politician has to go through life, I found that a little bit concerning early on in terms of trying to keep a sense of who I was through all of that. And that was before I'd even become a member of parliament and a minister, when people are then coming to you because they want something from you. That's a whole other thing you have to navigate. And I found that challenging throughout. And I worried as I, became kind of more senior in my political career, I was losing a sense of who I was before I came into politics, when I was more idealistic and perhaps more honest with people, not wearing that political mask that you wear because you've got to give a certain face to the public. And I try and explore all those kinds of avenues through my journey and through the book.
Mm-hmm. The one thing as well, which you noted in the book, was that engagement where you had with a friend who came up to you on the street, who you'd walked past, who I think had helped you on the campaign beforehand, and they felt that you changed later on throughout politics. Do you think people misjudged you, or do you think that perception was genuine in terms of the shift, or how do you reflect on that moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's like that's a good question, because I lost a self-awareness in the role. And so people were judging me based on a version of myself I was presenting to the public because I thought it was the right version of me to present to the public. And so I don't think it's unfair that people judged me based on what they were seeing, because I wasn't, I lived my life on social media. Back in 2018, at the kind of the height of my time in housing, Twitter was everything. Twitter was much more influential. It was back then, it was very much mainstream, and what happened on Twitter was real life. And so I was putting a version of myself out into the public through Twitter and other things that people weren't responding to, because it was giving an impression of someone who didn't care. And that's just part of the problem, and part of the reasons why people weren't responding to what I was doing in housing. There's policy reasons as well, but I brought on a lot of heat on myself because I was trying to keep the public at a distance, and I was trying to protect my private self, as I did this very big public role. And so eventually, people who were close to me or who had been close to me, that's all they saw as well. They didn't see the person that they knew in college or in the UN before I got involved in politics. They now only saw the person that I was presenting on the TV or through my social media or whatever, a less authentic version of myself. And they were very disappointed in it, and disappointed in the things I was doing as well, because of mistakes I had made. I mean, they weren't just communications mistakes, they were policy mistakes. And taken together, it started to turn a lot of people off. And I wasn't aware of this until this moment in the summer of 2018, when a couple of things happened, but one of them was this interaction with a friend who basically I could see he'd lost faith in me. And I was like, how did I get here? And that was for me at the time, it was the beginning of me trying to explore what I was doing wrong, but it was also the beginning of the time when I started to lose a handle of my mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and so much of that was very much during your time as housing minister, which you'd only come into the role, I think, the year before in 2017. But the standout thing for me in the book was that after 16, for a year, you had the junior finance role, and the chapters just screamed that you loved it, that you were great with the numbers, you loved doing the travel that came with it. Michael Noonan was tipping you to one day be a senior finance minister. Do you think that in many ways it was the housing portfolio, just the nature of that portfolio, that kind of led to where you ended up? Or had you gotten a different senior portfolio, that you might have had a much different trajectory in politics? And is it possible that whoever had gotten that housing ministry when they got it would have struggled in the way that you did?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there in that one. So so first of all, I was a junior minister for finance under Michael Noonan, who was an incredible mentor to me and taught me so much. It was very much an outward-facing job. So I wasn't looking into Ireland and looking at the challenges there. I was trying to promote Ireland as a destination for financial services, for crypto, for all different things that were going on, fintech. And so, I really enjoyed that aspect of it, of kind of championing Ireland abroad. My political career up to that point as a backbencher, I'd been on the Public Accounts Committee and then on the Banking Inquiry. So I understood finance in a way. I understood government spending. I understood some of these agencies that were working for the country to try and promote Irish enterprise. And I loved working with them. And I thought very good at that job. And then with Leo Varadkar's elevation to the Taoiseach's office, I looked to be in cabinet with them. And I think, a mistake I talk about in the book happens at that point, because up until then, my ambitions were, I suppose, a bit more pure. My ambition was to go into Dáil Éireann and speak on behalf of people, and give my judgment on issues and make decisions, and to speak truth to power, as cheesy as that sounds. And then when we came through 2016, I had the opportunity after that election to be in government, and I just wanted to be able to serve, to be useful to someone like Michael Noonan, to try and do some good things for our country. But as Leo's going into the Taoiseach's office, my ambition calculus kind of changes and it becomes more selfish. I just want to be a cabinet. There isn't like a definite thing that I want to get done. I just want to be at that table. Leo's moving up. I want to move up with them. I feel like I have a right to be there given what I've done. And so there's something in that, I think, about like how your ambition can be corrupted as well in jobs like these. And it's not just politics, but it probably wasn't the right motivation to go into the job. But when I got the housing brief, I was like, fantastic. Well, this is why I got into politics, was to fix big problems like these. So I threw myself at it completely. But I did struggle in it, and I made mistakes early on that kind of hung over me for the rest of my career. As things got bad, then I would revisit them and go, well, what if I had done this? Might things have gone differently? I don't know if I'd have been more successful in a different ministerial role. And I don't know if someone else had come in, might they have been more successful at housing? Because at the time, there was a real challenge, and it's more of a structural challenge. Because of the way that government works, I found that it could only deal with one crisis issue at a time. And at the time, it was Brexit. We were a minority government, first of all, and Brexit was everything. And I understand why it was everything, but the government really couldn't deal with more than one priority at a time. So, I think anyone who might have been in the brief at that time would have found it challenging for sure. They mightn't have made some of the mistakes that I made on the policy front, okay, and hopefully they might handle their mental health better as things didn't go well for them. But I play that what if game sometimes, and what if I had done something else? Maybe it would have gone better for me, maybe it wouldn't have. But when I play that game, if it means that I'm still in politics today, then I don't like that outcome, because I really enjoyed my political career in the round, but by the end of it, I was burnt out. And I feel very happy that I've been able to kind of get out of it on my own terms and get back to a private life, because I really didn't like being in the public eye.
Yes, yeah. Well, when you talk about, going to Leo and wanting that senior cabinet position, your reflection on it, I think, is very much a sense of, well, there might have been a better way to do it, either to lobby for a particular position that you might have had some background expertise in. But is there not a case to be made that, at that time, 2017, very few people had any sort of background expertise in housing because of the austerity measures, because we had just kind of kicked it off the agenda for some time. And that really, your ambition to go for senior cabinet, it is actually kind of what most TDs do. They don't want a particular portfolio. They want to be at cabinet because they've probably had a flavour of many different issues over the years. And that, just wanting to be a cabinet is actually quite a normal thing. And that many other peers of yours would have done the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, like ambition is normal, and you want to be ambitious. People should want to have executive experience in government. I couldn't go for the role I wanted to go for because I knew it had been promised to someone else, and I knew I didn't have the political capital at that point to shift Leo Varadkar's mind on that. When I was given housing,
what was that role on? Or can you share?
Well, I would have loved to have gone into foreign affairs because of my background in international politics. I don't think anyone would have been surprised at that. But I also wanted to go into enterprise because, as the junior minister for finance, I was doing a lot with our Enterprise Ireland and with the IDA. So I knew the people involved, and I did a lot of business events. But then when I got the housing thing, I mean, like in the banking inquiry, we had looked into the collapse of the Irish housing sector from a financial perspective. So I felt I had a very good approach from that point of view. We'd seen a lot of what the Rebuilding Ireland was, the government's housing plans. A lot of those ideas had to come through the Department of Finance and public expenditure while I was there. So I'd already seen some of the things that weren't working or that could work better. So I felt that was a very good starting point going into the brief. But it's hard to know what kind of background makes a good minister. We've had people who are doctors be health ministers and, maybe not get on so well on the job. Other governments have tried putting people into ministerial portfolios. I mean, Trudeau did it, where he had people from the right backgrounds, you would think, going into the right ministerial portfolios. And I don't know if it definitely meant for better outcomes. I don't think I was aware that Michael Noonan was a teacher until I was talking about it with someone last week. But he was an absolutely fantastic Minister for Finance. And there would be nothing necessarily about a teaching background that would lend itself to finance. But I think that speaks to the point that we want people from all types of backgrounds, and that what you're looking for is people who have got good judgment, who've got a good political sense of things, and who know what battles to fight and which to not to fight, and how to kind of work with their colleagues in certain issues. So again, I mean, I think if you're hoping that the right person with a housing background, say a building background, ends up as housing minister, it's probably difficult to achieve that. But also when they do, they might be coming with their own Perhaps it's a bias, perhaps it's a misconception that they can't just shake because they're so tied to that background.
Eoghan, getting to cabinet is one thing, and what strikes me from your time of getting to the senior ministry was, and I think this is a bit of a ambition throughout your political career, is that kind of flair for radical policies and moving the dial forward. So when you get into the housing ministry, what struck me in the book was this flair and this energy for, moving the dial on rebuilding Ireland and housing targets, and even the right to housing kind of came across the agenda here. But you were faced with the political structures and challenge of supporting your ambition. Do you feel that political structures inhibit meaningful reform?
Yeah, so like I was a troublemaker as a backbencher in my first term in the Dáil, and a group of us banded together, and we felt that the Dáil as it worked didn't work. And we just felt, look, if we don't fix this, our national parliament, we can make all the changes in government we want, but if the actual body that's meant to hold the government to account isn't worthy of it, we're going to make the same mistakes again. So we'd come in post-crash. We were a group of young, ambitious TDs. And so we were kind of bucking the trend and challenging our own government and speaking against the system. So yes, absolutely. The Dáil didn't allow for change. It was an institution built almost to resist change. I mean, it's a very conservative kind of institution. Obviously, it's our parliament, and it does very important things. But anyway, that was the kind of struggle in the first term. And then I get into the cabinet, and I get into government, and I still have those instincts. And that's one of the reasons why Leo put me in the job. That's what he said to me. He's like, listen, you're a bit, you've got this reputation. I know you'll think independently, come back with good proposals. But, unfortunately, and this is, one of those things that can happen, but it happened to me absolutely. I was worried it would happen to our government as a whole, and maybe it did to a degree. But I got captured by the system. And so my reformist instincts, my troublemaking instincts, once I began to meet resistance, I backed off rather than continued kind of hammering on them, because I didn't want to. I mean, some people have asked, were you afraid of losing your job? And it wasn't about that at all, actually, because it's too soon to fire. In politics, if you pick someone to do a job and you fire them very quickly, it looks bad on you, right? So it would have been too soon to fire me or for me to quit.
I think of Scaramucci, Trump's press secretary, getting
Right.
14 days. Yeah.
Yeah, and that makes Trump look bad in a way, but
Yeah.
So I had this, I didn't have to worry about that kind of thing, but I definitely, because I'd been so close to Leo, I was across decision-making in a very small group of people outside of cabinet that was making the big decisions across other things. And I didn't want to rock the boat too much because I didn't want to lose that influence. But I also believed that proximity to power would help me get other things done in housing along the line. So I was trying to weigh up the things, how hard to push things, when to kind of pull back. And unfortunately, early on, I pulled back too quickly on some big things. And that kind of hung over me. Now, might it have made a big difference in terms of how quickly we turned around, and started building housing again? Might it have made a difference around how people perceived the way I did my job? I don't know. But I always was disappointed in myself for maybe kind of withdrawing too quickly. And so that struggle then begins from that point on. I'm trying to struggle with this structure in government to get it to, kind of pivot to make housing more of a priority, like it had done with Brexit. And I just couldn't, even though I kept on trying, I just couldn't get it there.
Yeah, I mean, I to finish off the point, which is around, when I was looking at the numbers when reading the book, going from housing of 12,000 annual delivery all the way up to 25,000 by 2021. I know you have, even today, political parties, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, now aiming at 60,000 homes per year. And that kind of scale of ambition and delivery of homes, is it a case that the system, but also just wider politics, was it just not fit for that kind of rapid, fast implementation that had to happen?
Well, government can do that. Government can be fast and quick, and it can be ambitious. And like it was with Brexit, we were more prepared than anyone for Brexit, both politically, but also from a practical point of view. And when COVID happened, we moved with a speed I hadn't only really seen when dealing with store management, which was my responsibility. So the government can do these things, but it can't do too many things at once. And that it was kind of one of the frustrations that I had. So it's there, it's capable. And it's not like people didn't want to do it, it wasn't a priority. But until you actually say, right, the Secretary General of the Taoiseach's office and all of the Secretaries General are going to meet every week, and they're going to talk about housing, and everyone is going to do what they can do. It's only until you get to that point that it's an all of government actually dealing with the problem. And it's the way that government's kind of structured. So it's structured into departments. Every cabinet or every department kind of works in a silo. Even when you come together in cabinet, you're there to defend your department or to push forward its own proposals. And it's not really a collective body in that sense. But something like housing, because it touches into so many aspects of Irish life and policy and law, it requires every department to be involved in it. And we tried to do different things in the Custom House to bring other departments on board, whether it was justice or health, dealing with homeless people or that kind of stuff. And we just couldn't get it there. So that's what I mean, that's a structural problem with government, particularly with an issue like housing. You know, one department, the Custom House, can't solve it alone. It needs to be an all of government thing.
Got it. Makes sense. David, you had a question, I think?
One of the policies which you talk about pulling back on was the right to housing referendum. And, you know, when I read that in the book, I think, gosh, you almost were saving yourself some trouble by going down that route, because my base expectation for that sort of referendum is, like we saw with the two referendums earlier this year, that you're going to have various claims getting made about what a legal right to housing will actually mean, some of which could be quite well founded, some of which could be exaggerated, things like, you know, landlords may never be able to kick out tenants, something like to that degree. And that a referendum like that, whether Fine Gael runs it, Fianna Fáil or Sinn Féin, I think a referendum like that is going to be lost no matter who runs it. Is that too defeatist, or was there something in that policy that you still think is there and that you think should have been pursued if you were pushed a bit more?
I mean, it would definitely have been a risk, but I felt it was a risk worth taking, and it was a fight I was happy to have, because, and people will say, look, oh, that's just virtue signaling. And I make the point, even if it was just to signal a particular virtue, people needed to have faith that the government was on their side when it came to solving housing. And I felt that they didn't have that at the time when I went into the office. It's a really important part of the social contract. I mean, you can have full employment, you can have, you know, people going to work, you can have the economy rising, but if you can't afford to move out of your home and you're still living with your parents when you shouldn't be, or if you're living in a place that's too small because you can't afford to move, or if you're working really hard and most of your money is going on your rent, the social contract starts to break down. And we see things then happening in other areas of Irish life that are quite negative because people are angry and they're frustrated. And I think we've seen a bit of that in Ireland in the last number of years. So it's really, really important that people believe that you are committed to solving the problem, that you've got a plan to do it. And I thought that in pursuing that referendum, giving a right to housing in the Constitution, it would show the public that we were with them on this issue. But also, because we were spending more money than we'd ever been spending on it, and we were doing all these different things, I didn't see much of a difference between it being a government's responsibility or a person's right. So I thought, well, look, we're so close to each other in terms of, from an ideological point of view, you know, F the ideology, and let's just go and do this and show people that we care, and we'll fight this fight and we'll try and win it. Now, there would have been absolutely difficult legal arguments to navigate around, you know, tenants' rights versus landlords' rights, around property rights and things like that. But it was something I wanted to pursue. And, you know, not everyone agreed with me. And it was an argument that I lost early on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. On mental health and well-being in politics plays a big part of this book. And I commend you for surfacing these issues, which I don't think have made a big prevalence so far on those who've reflected on their time in Irish politics. So well done for doing so. And in the book, the death of Shane McEntee, who died by suicide, I think marked a turning point in how we viewed mental health in politics in Ireland. And you were open about your own struggles with sleep, tablets, even alcohol and drinking culture during your time in politics. How prevalent were those issues among other politicians, do you think?
Also, I mean, just not to be contrarian, but I don't think that Shane's passing marked a change in how mental health and politics were discussed in Ireland. Not internally, anyway. because the thing in Dáil Éireann was we're not talking about this. I remember coming back. I was told about Shane's death while I was doing a local radio show. I went back into the Dáil, and a lot of my colleagues were sitting around in the Dáil bar just openly weeping. But then after that, it was very much right, guys. That's we're moving on now. We're having a by-election. That's the most important thing. We're not going to talk about this. There was no effort to make any services that I can remember available to any of us. And it was only until a few months had passed later that I opened up to one of my colleagues privately to say, listen, I got a bit upset there over Christmas. Even though I hadn't known Shane well, we all felt that what had happened to him had been just grossly unfair. And we were all feeling hurt by it and hit by it, I suppose. And I remember opening up to a colleague and saying, look, I've been upset over Christmas. And he was saying he'd been exactly the same. And we wondered, well, the rest of us, who else is feeling this way? But the culture of the Dáil, and politicians talk about this, and I've talked about it, like the hypocrisy of us talking about it. We talk about the importance of mental health and funding for mental health, but we don't discuss it amongst ourselves, and we didn't, because you had to keep this very certain face to the public, one that was confident, one that was strong, because any sign of weakness in politics then becomes undermined very quickly. But I also know, since I've left politics, people who are now not contesting this election that's just been called, that they had similar issues to me, because obviously I wasn't the only person getting criticized or having a lot of pressure in their role, and I wasn't the only person, unfortunately, who wasn't dealing with it so well. So the fact that you have all these people not running again, it's not unrelated to why I got out of politics, and a lot more needs to be discussed around this. And since the book has come out, I've had current politicians getting on to me and kind of saying, thank you for talking about this stuff, because I think they want to talk about it more. But we need to create an environment or a culture where our politicians can be very honest about this stuff without it making them look like, for some reason, they then can't do their job as a representative, because for some reason, that's still an impression that's there.
Yeah. Owen, I've my own thanks to give to you, because one of the pieces in the book is where you talk about having stomach problems. And I myself had an episode of that, which I denied for many years was anything to do with stress. But it was only after it getting so bad that I lost 3 stone of weight, which I've since put back on. Anyone who's watching on YouTube will see that that's happened. But the point being that stress can go very much unnoticed. It can kind of fester for a long time. One of the remedies that you talked about in the book was trying to get on the Camino de Santiago in Spain. And I myself have also done that. I completed it last year in one spurt. You mentioned doing it, I think, in 2 separate points in the book. Which parts of it did you do, and have you done the rest of it, and did it actually make a difference?
Thanks. Yeah, so I did I think it's called the Ancient Way, which is a kind of a 2-week walk coming from the north down into Santiago. I did that in 2016 with an ex-girlfriend. We did it all in one go. It's its own stage. It's not part of the Franciscan way, which might be the way that you did, which is the longer route from the Pyrenees.
Yeah,
but
I did that one.
it's a very, it's really back to basics. It's your bag on your back. It's, very simple, but very good food. It's walking for hours. It's staying in very simple accommodation, but that's in the middle of nature. It's meeting people you wouldn't normally meet. And even though I'm not religious, it was a very spiritual experience for me. And I kind of like the idea of kind of maybe being hard on yourself physically a bit to try and get back to some sort of, kind of basic, better thoughts or whatever it is. So I found that very a huge relief for me at the time. In 2016, I was the junior minister in finance at the time, and really helpful. I went to try and go and do that again when I was in housing, but I was kind of already kind of physically and mentally exhausted when I went to do it, which isn't a great way to start a section of the Camino. And I was starting rather ambitiously over from Barcelona. It's not an official part of the Camino at all, but they're trying to make it one that might lead in. And it didn't have the kind of services, to kind of do it, so that the gaps between villages that you were walking to were too long. It didn't have rest stations along the way, a coffee shop or a place for tapas. And Spain was going through like a 40 degrees a day minimum heat wave. Yeah. And so I started off, and that was just a really bad idea. So the Camino is great, but you've got to be starting it from the right place. I mean, if you start it when you're already knackered, you're not going to get very far, and I didn't. And then I ended up quitting after, I think, about 5 days. Yeah. But I I had people saying it to me for years. It's really worth doing. And I say to people as well, I mean, I've had a good experience doing it and a bad experience. I'd like to get back to it. And I might get back to it. But like, again, for mental health things, for me, the physical is very much linked to the mental. So when I was trying to then recompose myself in housing after going through some kind of difficult periods and losing kind of track of my mental health, it was running that got me back into better mental health, because I'd let go of my physical health completely. And I thought, well, if I start running again, I'll get fit, I'll build up a physical resilience, and with that might come a mental fortitude. And that's what happened. That was my experience, actually. And that helped me kind of recompose myself in the job.
Oh, and one of the elements in the book as well that you speak about was being afraid to seek mental health help because of how it might be perceived. I think you reference in the book about seeing a counselor or a therapist. And I know for myself, I've had a therapist for a while now. It's been one of the best investments I've ever made in my own mental health, and I've seen some real benefits from that. So forward looking, what needs to happen to make politics in Ireland a more mental health safe place to be, that genuinely is open and transparent about how people are doing?
Yeah, I don't know if I've got a good answer for that, but I know that when I went to trial, I mean, I was kind of forced by people close to me to go and talk to someone. I didn't like it at the time. I was a bit embarrassed that I needed it, because I had the wrong idea about mental health. Right, it's not something, I thought it meant something else. So I was a bit embarrassed that I needed it, and yeah, I wasn't comfortable doing it. But also, I felt that because of the kind of job that I did, I was wondering how much can I actually say or reveal. And what if that ever got out? What if this person keeps a note in a meeting and that meeting note finds its way somewhere? Or, you have all these ideas that you get paranoid about because the job is so public. And if it were ever to be revealed, you feel you'd be out of that job. And I go to therapy now, and it's super, and again, I was kind of dragged there by a former partner, and it's something she's always done. And she got me to go, which is great, because I was kind of using writing the book as my therapy. I was using that to kind of explore myself and what went wrong and that kind of stuff. But once I started talking to someone, it was even a better thing, and it turned things. But for politicians and mental health, I think if a politician came out today and said they were seeing a therapist, maybe one has. I've no idea, because I'm sorry, I'm not paying enough attention. But
Yeah.
I wonder how that would be viewed if a politician, a cabinet member, said, I see a therapist. Would people say that's brilliant? Would some people go, uh-oh, maybe they're off for a run in the middle of the night like Eoghan Murphy was when he was having a breakdown, And so unless we've actually got an environment that will be accepting of, therapy as an absolutely standard normal practice, like going for a run, going to see a therapist, having your lunch, these are all things that we do to be healthy human beings, then it's going to be very difficult for politicians to actually, fix their own environment for mental health, better mental health. But I'm sorry, I don't have an answer to that, but I know the fears that I had about discussing it publicly. I was afraid of discussing it with my colleagues and my friends, because I'm like, politics is still a blood sport in many ways. It's still a career where winner takes all. You either get the votes or you don't. And if you don't get the votes, well, you're gone. And people lose confidence in you. It can be very difficult to regain that. And so I was always worried that if colleagues knew that I wasn't handling the job internally well, that I might lose that job. Because for whatever reason, the culture in there is one that sees difficulties or mental health challenges, I think, very negatively, at least when I was there. And if that doesn't change, then I'm not sure what other things you could do to actually improve it, I guess it requires leadership from someone in there, leadership that I didn't give when I was there.
As part of the book, you talk about how Darragh O'Brien, you ended up having a meeting with him to kind of give a bit of a handover to him taking over the housing role. I'm curious if you've reflections on what you would say today going into the next housing minister. It might be Darragh O'Brien again, but if it's someone different, so much has changed. I think since you left the role, even in a short few years. Would you be giving the same advice as you gave to Darragh O'Brien to the next housing minister, or would you say something a bit different?
Well, I don't know Yeah, I don't know on, I mean, like, so on the policy stuff, I don't know what changes have been made since I was there. So I don't know what good policy advice I could give. But I mean, and I didn't know Dara personally well enough to maybe give him very good advice when it came to either looking after himself or managing the systems within. The kind of structural things that I hit up against. But I would definitely I'd be telling them to look after themselves, of course, to try and find some perspective. I mean, you might only be in cabinet once. It's a huge opportunity, a huge privilege, and it's the most important thing you might ever do in your life. But you still got to somehow keep it in perspective so that it doesn't get in the way of other parts of your life. I mean, it can't be the most important thing every day that you're there. I mean, it is to a degree, and it's hard to escape that given the responsibility. But you've got to still try and find time for yourself, small little breaks for your mental health, for your physical health, for your family, for a bit of you time. All that kind of stuff is so important where you can to understand what's important. And you've got to have the courage maybe it's hard because cabinet requires collective cabinet responsibility. So this is what I found with when I lost the internal argument about a right to housing. Even in cabinet, I had to speak against a right to housing, and in public, I had to speak against it, even though I didn't agree with it, because we have to speak with one voice. So you've got to find a way to stand apart from, government if you don't agree with it, but not so far that you're then no longer in government and doing what you want to do. So, yeah, I mean, it's about having the kind of courage of your convictions, I guess, and knowing when you got to fight and put your foot down, and remembering that your responsibility ultimately is to the policy issues you're trying to solve. It's not to your own career prospects, and unfortunately, it's not to your party. You've got to put those things aside and go, how do I actually fix this problem? Forget my party, forget who's in government, forget who's in opposition, forget the ideology. When it comes to something like housing, it's what's going to work and what's going to work best, and to kind of pursue that without any kind of fear or favor. And it's difficult sometimes because ultimately the job is political. So you get caught up in the politics, you get the politics of the media, politics of your own backbenches, the politics of other things that are happening in government. And it can be distracting, but really you've got to stay in your lane and really know what you want to accomplish and know what it is that you want to do. And I knew what I wanted to do, but I never had a chance really to go out and tell the public that and give them my vision, again, because I was worried about party politics and how that might look or how someone else might feel about me, maybe not tearing up their plan, but reworking their plan a bit. And all those things I let kind of override my own instincts to go out to the public and say, this is what I think we should do, and this is how I think we should do it. And those would be the kinds of reflections I'd be giving to a new minister, but also, keeping in mind that they'd have their own ideas and that kind of thing,
The piece around perspective, Eoghan, and keeping perspective, and in the book, you shared aspect of your personal life from, I think, how much you valued your family and how important they were and are to you, from dating and also the loss of your unborn child as well. So really kind of personal moments and elements of your life. Do you think today's political environment supports a healthy balance between personal and political? Or is it just inherently too invasive? And even reflecting on social media and how all-consuming that was on your time in office.
Yeah, it's can there be a proper work-life balance in politics? I don't know. Certainly when you're a cabinet minister, and it was like something Enda Kenny had said to me was, look, you'll only get this responsibility once. It's a huge opportunity to actually do some good, so give it everything. But, and he's right on that point. But when you're a cabinet minister, you can never turn off your phone because you might be needed at any time for any reason. And there's so many different incidents in the book where, I've got to take that call because something's happening. Some of them are very serious, some of them less serious, but at the same time, it's your responsibility. You're the minister. Even if you turn your phone off to go to the cinema for 2 hours, God knows what might erupt on Twitter while you're in the cinema because you haven't tweeted quickly enough. All of a sudden, people are saying you clearly don't care, And so
Can't win.
I thought you really. Sorry?
You can't win.
No, yeah, but and so you can't really escape the fact that you've got to always be on, and it's very, very difficult to balance that. And it's very hard to get perspective because when you believe that your job is like one of the most important jobs in the country, it lends you to acting in a very selfish way, which I talk about in the book, and everything else comes second to that, and your relationships, your family, your friends, And because you believe this is more important than than they're saying or than what they want to do or how they're feeling. And I treated people badly because I treated the job that way. And, I don't think everyone does. I think there's a way that you can find that balance. I think it helps if you've got a family, your own personal families and your own kids and stuff, because they will be so much more important to you that you'll be able to prioritize them and you'll be able to put the job aside for bits of time. I just wasn't able to do that. I had nothing to really pull me away from it. So I kind of, um, kind of got lost in it to a degree. And I was seeing someone and then we weren't seeing someone. And then, you made reference to the miscarriage and stuff. And when I was going through that, when I thought I was going to be a dad, all of a sudden, because at the time I was trying to leave the government, I was trying to exit as housing minister. And I had to put that to one side because I thought I was about to be a dad. So all of a sudden I found a better perspective on what's important in life. And very unfortunately, my former partner had a miscarriage. And so, that was in a whole other thing that I was dealing with at the time and couldn't process because by that stage, my mental health had almost completely kind of lost control of it. So that was very difficult. But it's in a way, the story is, one way to look at it is how not to have the right perspective, how not to be a minister, how not to manage this job. That's kind of some of the lessons I'm trying to bring through with it,
I know you spoke as well of, I suppose, the advantages in a way of how you went into politics was that you were young, you were unmarried, you didn't have kids, you didn't have those attachments. So there seems to be a real trade-off here whereby people like yourself can go in big when they're young, but then you're missing those supports that could have been a real lifeline to you during those difficult periods.
Yeah, I mean, like I see it now sometimes. Like I was very lucky when I got involved in politics. I was in my mid-20s, so no one had families or kids yet. We had a lot of free time, so I could get a lot of people around my campaigns to put up posters, knock on doors, and do that stuff. If I was trying to run now at 42, it would be very hard to raise a volunteer army because people are living their lives, and Saturday morning is for taxiing kids to football games. It's not for going out and canvassing outside the supermarket. So there's that aspect of things. Like I definitely had at the age I got in was very helpful. But I look, there's I guess problems in my own personality or whatever about why I found myself going into cabinet. I mean, it was an interesting thing. I think I was probably the only single cabinet minister, and I had all this time. I felt that would help me, evenings, weekends, just to give to figuring out the policy stuff, working harder and harder. But I'm not sure I was working smarter, and it was one of the things that a colleague said to me when he saw I was kind of struggling, and he was kind of saying, "Look, you need someone to help you here on the personal side of things," and he was kind of wishing I did, and I think it would have made a difference because, it mightn't have made a policy difference, but I might not have gotten so caught up in what was going wrong, and I might have been able to at least manage myself a little better, which might have then led to some better outcomes towards the kind of second half of my tenure. Yeah.
Eoghan, with that, we are out of time, but we want to thank you for coming on the show today. Book was a fascinating read. I think, thank you for your honesty and how open you are about your personal struggles and what it's really like behind the covers of political life in Ireland, because I think it's often not talked about, and I think this is a really great and open read. So with that again, Eoghan, your book is Running from Office, Confessions of Ambition and Failure in Politics. It's a great read. It's available in all major bookstores now, and we think it's a fantastic read. So that's all we have time for this week. Eoghan, we thank you for your time. David, good to see you again, and we'll see you again next week. Take care.